we have next up we have Arya M. Shankar giving a talk on Kickstart to secure software development. And Arya M. Shankar is a security researcher at Siemens, and she's currently into secure software development and cybersecurity analyst roles. She's also focusing on the field of application security with keen interest in secure software development and secure coding. She has prior experience in penetration testing, malware analysis, and vulnerability assessments. She pursued her master's in cybersecurity systems and networks, and she has a bachelor's in computer science engineering. So over to you, Aryam Shankar, and welcome to ShaktiCon.
Hi, Sandra. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for your introduction.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm really happy to be part of this event. Being an alumni of Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham and also being a part of Siemens, I am really honored to be here representing both Amrita and Siemens. So I'll just start by sharing my screen.
Okay, your screen is visible.
Okay. Just give me a second. Okay. So, yeah. So a bit about me. I am an alumni of Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham. I did my master's in cybersecurity systems and networks. Prior to that, I did my BTech in computer science. So right after my university, I joined Siemens. I am part of research and development team who is focusing on software development and who's mainly focusing on the software security. So our team, we starting from research and development, we do get into different areas of security. We look into security auditing and consultation as well. So that's a bit about my work at Siemens. So today I'll be talking about secure software development. Getting to the slides. So this is the agenda we'll cover today. Why software security, a walkthrough on software development processes. So why we have the SDL and a lot of other software development already in the industry. You all might be familiar of software development and the terms which I'll be talking today from academics. So I'll put some effort to connect the dots between what we learn in academia and the industry. So the things which I didn't know before joining an industry, so I'll try to fill that gap. Then I'll be touching up on the state of art, the SDL methodologies and frameworks. Then finally, we'll look into how to develop software securely. So in that section, we'll try to look a bit into the mechanisms, technologies, and the tools for this for securely developing in software. So going to the next slide. Yeah. Here, in this slide, we'll look at the statistics of software vulnerability 2020. Here, the first figure shows about the NVD 2018 to 2020 statistics. So NVD is the National Vulnerability Database, which is maintained by the US government. They actually have a record of all vulnerabilities that have happened so far. The real old vulnerabilities, like 20 years back, they have a record of every vulnerabilities, and they call it by CVE, which is the Common Vulnerability Enumeration. So as of now, NVD have an entry of 150K CVEs. So now we are looking at the statistics of what happened from 2018 to 2020. The 2021, we just finished the first quarter, so let's end with the 2020 statistics. So if you see the statistics, you can see the gradual increase in the vulnerability. In 2018, it was 17 hundreds, and 2019 also we were still in 17K, and finally in 2020 we reached 18K, 18,332. So you can see the gradual increase in the vulnerabilities. So I do not say that all these vulnerabilities were put into the code or in the software. More vulnerabilities are coming up in 2020 is not what I'm trying to say, but maybe we are more curious about security, and the already existing vulnerabilities could have been identified or detected in 2020. That could also be the case. We are not sure about that. So it could be from the latest applications, or maybe the vulnerabilities which were lying there for a very long time. So that's how the statistics goes. And the second figure is the statistics provided by EdScan. So I took this from EdScan 2020 vulnerability scanning report. So they have done a quick study on the vulnerabilities, the total number of vulnerabilities they found in internet-facing applications and the internal network applications. So if you see here, they have provided the severity, low, medium, high, and critical. Low being the lowest severity and critical being the really high critical vulnerabilities. So in the internet-facing network, 4.79% of all vulnerabilities were high or critical. So from this, we can understand the impact or the impact or the depth of an attack or a risk. If any of these vulnerabilities are, if they are exploited, then it's really huge. So and the medium ones come up to 27. So altogether, if you take the medium and high in the critical, they add up somewhere around 30%. So 30% of the vulnerabilities had a very high criticality, and all these applications were facing the internet. And now secondly, we are looking at the internal network. So first of all, when we bring the difference of not letting an application get into the public network and the internal network, from that categorization only, it's easy for us to understand. We might be dealing with a much more severe content. We don't want everyone to have access to that content. But if you look here, around 12% of the vulnerabilities were high and critical, and 24% were from medium. So if exploiting any of these could lead to around 40% of vulnerabilities are out there. So exploiting that could be a really huge risk and impact for the product and the company. So this is the current statistics. Now we'll see what is software development lifecycle. So most of you might be familiar with the terms, as I said, from our academics. But today I'll put an effort to help you understand the why we have software development lifecycle in the industry. Why do we have this term, or what do they offer? How do they offer? And what are the different methodologies of frameworks they have? So software development lifecycle, it's a well-organized process that would help you to develop softwares that guarantees few of the offerings. So the quality, the customer expectations, and the predefined parameters, which could be time, cost, or resources. So when we have an idea for developing an application, we cannot directly just go to the coding phase and deliver the product. So we have to do a lot of considerations, and we have to take a lot of factors into mind before we get into the implementation and deployment phase. So if we do not do any of that, there are a lot of problems which could happen later. Like we might have to compromise on the quality just to finish it within the time, and we might not be able to meet all the customer expectations. So all these are the problems that could happen. So if we strictly follow a software development lifecycle, at least these three offerings we can definitely bring in. So these are the other offerings, which the projects outlining, scheduling, and budgeting. So in a very early stage, even before we start development, if we have a very clear understanding of the issues, if we have a very clear understanding of what the idea is, how to take it forward, what is the final product, what should be the final product, what are the requirements. So doing a basic study and an outlining of all these understanding will help us to go forward and develop a better product. So projects outlining, scheduling, and budgeting far ahead before we start developing will help us. Then it reduces the project risk and overhead. So if we have planned earlier, if we have done the scheduling and outlining and also budgeting earlier, we won't be having much risk later. So that's how we can reduce the project risk and overhead. This will definitely improve the client relations. When there are situations when we start developing a product and later the requirements which was put forward by the customer and what we bring up might be entirely different. We might end up developing a product which was with the qualities which was not asked for, or there might be misunderstandings somewhere. So having a continuous communication with the customers will really improve the client relationships. And yeah, the stakeholders will have a clear visibility of where we are at each period of time. This would also boost the development speed. So because the developers have a clarity on what to be developed, what are the technologies to be used, they have a very clear idea of what to do or what steps they should be at each time. So an SDL would help. These are the basic offerings we get when we strictly follow a software development lifecycle. So now we'll try to understand the different phases of SDL, starting from planning, which is marked 1, to maintenance, which is marked 6. So 1 is planning, 2 analysis, 3 design, 4 implementation, 5 testing and integration, and finally 6 the deployment and maintenance. So these are the different phases in an SDL. I'll quickly look into each of those. So planning being the first phase. So anytime the stakeholder or the customer approaches for the development of a project, they come up with an idea. So that's when the phase 1 comes into play. We have a discussion on understanding what are they looking for, what product do they want, why exactly do they want that product, who would be the final consumers. So all this discussion will happen during the planning phase, and definitely there will be the idea feasibility. We will be checking for the feasibility of the product. Is it even possible to develop within the limited timeline, budget, and the resources? Obviously, the skills. So those sort of discussions will happen in the planning phase, and we'll decide on the feasibility. So after we are ready to go forward with the project, we'll be going to phase 2, which is analysis. So by analysis, we mean the requirement analysis. So at this point, the requirement analysis we see from the perspective of the consumer. We will be doing a thorough understanding, or we'll try to understand all the features and the non-operational and the non-functional features that the user might need. So both the functional and operational requirements will be considered here, and these are the requirements which will be implemented later while developing the product. So the next phase is design. All the input you get from the planning and analysis phase will go as an input to the design. So as the term says, design, we are trying to get a diagrammatic representation of the idea and the requirements which we identified in the earlier 2 phases. So in the design phase, this design would stand as a base for implementation. So all the understanding or all the technologies, framework, the architecture we'll be following, that should be coming in the design phase. So here, this would be the blueprint which we provide to the developers. So rather than letting them take the choice on how to develop the product or what are the different components, how should they communicate, so that's a huge risk to give them the decision. So before that, we'll have a design and we'll give a clear blueprint of what to be done, what are the different components, how should they communicate, and all these decisions will be put into the design, and the architecture will be provided to the developers. So everything related to something like pseudocodes, process diagrams, screen layout, all that fall under the design phase. And then we get into the implementation phase. So here comes the final, the coding. So coding is not the first phase, which comes really late. We had planning, analysis, design, and only on top of all these decisions and discussions, the implementation will start. So strictly following the decisions taken in the design phase, we'll do the implementation. And finally, we'll go for the testing and integration. So once we finish implementation or set of testing to ensure that the product is meeting all the requirements and also it's functioning properly, we'll do the testing. But we'll come across the bugs, errors, and features. There'll be a lot more testing. There are a lot of testing like unit testing, regression. So all these testing will be done here to ensure the features of the product. Right after this, we have the deployment and maintenance. So once it's a go for releasing the product, we go for deployment. After deployment, we have something called maintenance. It's a continuous monitoring of the performance of the product and also giving feedback and also taking the feedbacks and updating the products accordingly. So these are the different phases. These are the common phases which you'll see in any of the SPL methodology or framework you choose. So let's have a quick look at few of the common SPL methodologies. So here I have just listed 5 of them. The waterfall model being the oldest one and agile model being the recent one. So there are reasons why each of these models came up. Few of the drawbacks for the earlier ones led to the invention of the new models. So starting with if you check in each of these models, the phases which we discussed earlier, you can see the same phases here, but just how these phases are executed or the modeling is the only difference. So let's have a quick look at waterfall model. In this model, we have requirements, design, development, testing, deployment, maintenance. So the one of the main feature of this model is you always go in step by step. It is not possible for you to jump or do 2 steps at the same time. You can't simultaneously work on 2 phases. You can move forward only once you finish things, and it is not possible for you to go back to the earlier phase. So that's how a waterfall model works. And the main drawback for this is, in case if you have some requirements which comes at a very later stage of the development, then you cannot fit in. So it's not feasible enough to take the requirements at any time it comes, as in the recent development models. So you have to be very systematic and you should have all the requirements ahead before you start working on it. So that is one of the main drawbacks. And also waterfall model doesn't give frequent releases. They go for a large monolithic release at the end. So that takes actually a lot of time. It takes a very long time. You don't have any frequent releases. You come up with a very long, the final monolithic release. So it takes a lot of time. And that's why we had a V-shaped model coming up. But the only difference they implemented was jumping from one phase to the next phase, they had a testing check. That's all the difference. That's all the change they have made. Apart from that, the restriction of going back to the previous phase or accepting new requirements at any phase of the development is still a drawback in V-shaped model. They still can't adapt to that. Then we have the iterative and incremental model. So here they were trying to solve the issue in the previous 2 models. So here they came up with an idea of developing the product as early as possible with the limited requirements you know. So you don't have to know all the requirements ahead. You don't have to collect all of it. You can start with what you have. Then you develop, you test it. And finally, once you identify what are the limitations or what are the more requirements to be added, you go back and you add it again. So it's an iterative model. So each iteration would give you a refined and a better product. So that's how it works. And the same thing goes with the spiral model. It comes on top of iterative model, but the only difference is spiral model is targeting, it's not suitable for small projects because they do give more importance to risk analysis. So for small projects, it might be hard to accommodate the risk analysis experts to handle it. So Spiral models are mostly suggested for small projects. And in the case of the iterative and spiral model, one of the drawbacks is uh, even though they will give you a sample of the product at the real early stage, they'll keep on repeating or they'll keep on iterating the product as refinable as possible. So it will keep going. It will you don't know till how much time it will take, or it's indefinite. So at the starting stage of the product development, you do not have an idea on how much time it might take. So there is also a chance of exhausting the resources you have, the time, the cost. You might exhaust all of it. So these were the drawbacks for both of them. And then came the agile model. Comparing to the other four models, agile model have put an effort to fix the issues. Agile model releases a product in every 2 to 4 weeks. They are releasing. They give the releases the sprints. So every 2 to 4 weeks we get a sprint, and we know very well when we can get the product and when we can give a requirements. In case if we forgot providing few requirements, or if you want to tweak them slightly, it is still possible. It's not like waterfall model of you can't adapt to it. Agile model is mainly focusing on satisfying the customers. So we will be in constant communication with the customers, and anytime they bring up a requirement, Agile model is ready to adapt it, and they will be those requirements will be added to the very recent release. So that's how Agile works. They are quicker and they are very feasible. So these are the STL models, the state of art. And now we'll talk about security in the STL. So if you check these methodologies, something what we miss is security. So where does the security come in? So let's talk a bit about how it all started. Waterfall models came around 1970s, long back. So back then there were no much of connection to the internet, or there were no much devices connected to internet. So at that time, if you want to make an attack, you need to have a local connection, or you should have local access. So that was how they made attacks long back then. But then in 2001 is when Agile model came out. Then it took quite some time for transition from waterfall model to Agile model. Companies adapting to that. So that time, security was not their main idea, but as it was an era of internet, slowly they had to adapt to it. So they brought up security, but then security was put after releasing the product. So post-release, security testing was what they adapted. So once they released the product, and that have a lot of vulnerabilities already in it, slowly they came to know it's not the best idea to do, because attackers and the testers, they both will be accessing the code at the same time. So they slightly changed it to the pre-release security testing. So maybe they were affected with a lot of security issues, and a lot of attacks happened, which made them push it forward. So that was pushed to pre-release security testing. So pre-release security testing, they have so as I showed the software development lifecycle earlier, they have pushed it just before deployment. So when we are doing the testing phase, they have brought the pre-release security testing as well. That's a point where developers are already under a lot of pressure. They have to get the product functioning, all the features and the requirements working, and they are already under pressure to deliver it on time, which really affects the reputation. But at that time, you put the security testing and a lot more issues coming up, which was not anticipated. Some of the issues can be fixed easily. That depends on how much they thought about security. But if security was not a consideration since the beginning of the development, the issues they come across that point will be really hard to fix in a small span of time. So placing the security testing at the critical path of release was the decision they did, and it really hindered the product release. It was affecting the reputation, and it kept on delaying the product release. So mostly people started to sign off the security to thinking of the reputation and the time delay. They just close off the security and they release the product. So this is how security, most of the cases, work in STL. This is the history. So how can we solve this issue? That is by secure software development life. So by secure software development lifecycle, I mean, rather than bringing security to the last phase, it's preferred to bring security to the initial phase. Shifting security left is what we say. So as we spoke earlier, from phase one, that is planning, to the last phase, which is operations, the maintenance, every single phase should have security factor. You can't just bring it in the last moment. So how do we do that? What are the mechanisms? What are the tools? And how we can do that? I'll talk about in the next slide. So yeah, the planning. Planning phase is where we think about the feasibility of the product. We discuss about the requirements, the from the consumer point of view, why they are developing the product. So at this point, rather than having a very generic or budget discussions, they also have to bring in the security experts and the subject matter experts who will give the advice on the security requirements. So if they're so they should not be kept to the last. They have to be involved from beginning. So rather than knowing these requirements finally after the production stage, it's really hard to implement them. So knowing them initially would really help us a lot on reducing the time and resource. In the next phase, it is requirement analysis. That in that phase also we have to bring in security. So the experts will really help us choose wisely on deciding the framework, technology, or programming languages we should be using. Bringing them early to the bringing security perspective early would also help us to know the right softwares to use. There are times when we use third-party libraries, or a lot of times we use open source tools. So you can actually make a decision if should you go buy an open source tool or should you procure some other software. So all these decisions should be taken considering security, and it should be done at this phase, not later. Once you cross this, you can't come back and fix it. So next one is design. Design phase, as we spoke earlier, the inputs from planning and analysis would be changed to a diagrammatic representation, which is the security architecture. So security design review is a must. Because there are a lot of guidelines, if you check, there are a lot of guidelines on security design review. So if we try to comply with some of them, at least those which really fits in the product we are developing, we can really bring down a lot of issues. Most of the vulnerabilities you see today, 40% of them are because of design flaws. So when you have an issue with the design and you do not cover it up, or you do not fix it at the design phase, then you'll have to do it later while implementation or in any other stages, testing. You have to cover it up in other phases. So rather than fixing one issue at a time, if you don't choose to fix it, then you'll have to cover it up using other 10 or other a lot more hacks, which is actually not recommended because it will leave a chance for more vulnerabilities and logical flaws. So once you don't fix the design at that time, it will be really hard because there's no coming back and fixing it. So it is highly recommended to go for a security design review, data flow, secure data flow review, and also a threat modeling. Threat modeling is a practice where we try to identify, this practice would help you to identify the potential threats ahead of time. So you can also implement the remediations and you can take the decisions at this phase, the design phase early. Next one is implementation. Knowing to code is really good. We can develop the product, but just knowing code is not enough. You need to know the secure coding, or else at least you have to try to comply to the standards, recommendations, and guidelines. A lot of standards, maybe at least stick on to one of them, like MITRE, NIST, and we also have Oracle secure coding standards. So sticking to one of them could drastically bring down the bugs and weaknesses in the code. The next one we can do is SAST, static application security testing. We can use a lot of open source as well as commercial tools for testing the code. Some of the examples are Veracode. We have Synopsys for Verity. These are the tools. They are commercial tools. You can use those for static application security testing. And then we have the software composition and software composition analysis. So here, um, these tools would really help you to understand the components, the open source components that is incorporated in the code base, their license. If do they comply to the license data, you can check that, and also they will help you to understand the vulnerabilities in these open source, uh, the open source components you are using. So that these are few of the main stuff we miss out, because we just developing something is not enough. You have to always think from the security perspective. So secure coding, bringing in static application security test tools, and also the software composition analysis would really help you to bring down the weaknesses and flaws. Testing. To confirm that the product works fine, or it it do have all the features, we are doing testing like unit testing, regression tests. All those tests are already done. That's basic. Those are the basic approaches we do in a software development lifecycle. But thinking from the security point of view, we have to bring DAST, which is dynamic analysis. That too, you have a lot of tools, both open source and commercial ones. When we look at pen testing, fuzzing is something that is being more common nowadays. Fuzzing is the process of providing a lot of malformed and invalid inputs to the product and trying to see if the product crashes or if it is accepting the input, the invalid input. So these are the techniques which are used by both attackers and the security experts to ensure security is in place or not. And then we can bring in CI/CD pipeline. CI/CD pipeline is the continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline. Here we use a lot of automated tools, the really reliable automated tools. As manual review is extensive and it's more time taking and it's more hard. So it's suggested to bring in automated tools, and then we can have a manual review on top of it. So CI/CD pipelines will help you be more quick and not to miss out anything, because humans might bring in errors. Certifications and accreditations. So it is at this point that if you are doing, if you have to comply to any of the standards or certifications, you should be testing it here, and you should get certified. For example, if you do secure code, if you're doing a code review, or if you're doing a design review, you should get it certified about the risk or your current status. How much do you comply? How much percentage do you comply? So based on that report, only we can go forward. Only once you really pass the testing phase, you can go to the deployment. At the deployment point, you will be configuring. You'll check for the configurations of servers and networks. And once you deploy the product, we still have to monitor. We should be doing a continuous monitoring of the product. We'll be doing the performance review. Any vulnerabilities or any issues which is found after releasing the product, or you can find issues after releasing it. There might be a vulnerability in the third party you used. So definitely you can update it and you can release it again. You can fix the issue even before the vendor gives out a advisory or a release. You can fix it up and manage it before attackers use it, or else you can update. So these are the different mechanisms or the techniques we have in place to bring security to every phase of the software development lifecycle. And you might be familiar with the term DevSecOps. It is coming up nowadays. So DevSecOps, as it stands for Development, Security, and Operations. So rather than letting these three teams work at three different corners, it's suggested to bring them together, and collaborations would really help to bring down the security issues and also hasten the development and deployment. So I have already spoke about plan, coding, operations, and monitoring in the previous slide. So I'll touch a bit on the build, test, release, and deployment. So This is where we bring in the CI/CD pipeline. So continuous integration and continuous deployment is where, so yeah, the continuous integration has a lot of automated tools already in place. So anytime you make a slight change in your code, whether it be just a one-line change in your code base, it is suggested and it's mandatory for the code base to go through a whole set of automated tests. And it has to pass each of the tests. So whether it be a small change or a huge change, you can add more modules. So whatever changes you do, it is mandatory to go through the test again and make sure you pass. So there will be security gates and all the security tools. You should pass all the tests, and only then you can get to the deployment phase. Once you reach the deployment, as earlier we spoke, we'll get to the monitoring phase and we'll keep updating in case of new CWEs or a series are released. Accordingly, we'll keep sending patches and we'll have to update them. So as a conclusion, what I suggest is, rather than taking security to the last phase, it is better if we bring security to the front. It's always better to push security to the left and bring in security from phase one. Fixing them at the final stage would be really risky and time-consuming as well as costly. So it's highly recommended to bring security from phase one. And as I just now talked about CI/CD pipelines, bringing a lot of automated tools would really speed it up and also take away the manual, the human errors. We can definitely have a manual review after we get the automated reports. So that's about CI/CD pipeline. And yeah, the third figure, it explains again how to bring in security to each phases of the software development lifecycle. And yeah, this is an interesting graph which I found. This was a study done by IBM. So this study says when you fix an issue at the design phase, if it costs you 1, then you neglecting at the design phase and later fixing at the implementation phase would cost you 6 times fold. Again, neglecting at implementation, later fixing at testing phase would cost you 15 times. So this is why it's highly recommended to bring in security since beginning and not to neglect security. So I have reached the end of the presentation. I would also like to say that this is what our team mostly works on, and we are actually hiring. So if any of you are already interested in these topics, or if you want to get in contact with us, please, you can connect me. You can drop me a message in LinkedIn. I would be more than happy to help you. So yeah, that's end of the session. Thank you.
Okay, Arya, that was a great talk, and I'm sure many people have benefited from this, like with respect to how whether the coding part should come, the secure coding part should come during the software development phase or at the end, or like when that should be happening. We have one question in the chat asking the same: security development life cycle and software development life cycle, does both of it have to work parallelly, or can we add security phase of maintenance in the maintenance phase of the software?
Yeah, so I would say, like, we need to bring security since the beginning. We should not keep it finally to the maintenance phase. As I just now showed the last figure, if you remember, there was a graph which shows how much more risky it's or how much more costlier it is when you fix at the last phase. So I just showed a figure where it shows when you fix it at the design phase, if it costs you 1, then later when you fix it in the implementation phase or implementation phase, it's 15 times fold, and at the maintenance phase, it was 100 times fold after deployment. So it's highly risky to go for that, and strongly suggested to bring security since the planning phase. Yeah.
Okay, if we have any more questions, you guys can drop your questions in the chat. We have a few more questions.
Yeah.
What is a good resource for secure coding practices? OWASP checklist is quite old and has not been updated recently.
Yeah. So you can find a lot of, I mean, if you're aware of Oracle Secure Coding, they are updated. They keep releasing their new books the latest one was 2018. So they are really good. They have secure coding practices for multiple languages, C, C++, Java, Perl, Android. So yeah, I would suggest Oracle Secure Coding.
We have one more questions. One more question. What are the disadvantages of securing at the end of development stage? I think you already answered that.
Yeah, that's similar to the first question. I'll just recap. Uh, the developers would already be trying to get the product out at the last stage. So they are already in the pressure of setting the environment, pushing it to the production stage. So at that point, you face a lot of security issues, and it will be really hard for you to fix it within that short span of time. And that would really affect the reputation of the company, and that's not what people usually consider. So mostly they turn off security at that, and then you are just releasing products without security, and the hackers out there are waiting for it. So I don't think that's what you want. So yeah. Any more questions?
As of now, we don't have any more.
Okay, I would be more than happy to help you. You can just drop any of your questions in my mail, or you can connect me via LinkedIn. So I hope that's the end of the session then. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, and thank you to you and Siemens for sponsoring this event, and we thank you from on behalf of ShaktiCon. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for joining.
yeah. My pleasure.